I added a few more details and I'm trying to figure out the proportions for the sculpture. And I did remove the clay supporting the rib cage, but I kind of feel like I need to increase the size of the rib cage. There's things that I'm, just keep working out. So if I need to increase the size of the rib cage, and the head is a little bit too big, but I think the thing that I'm considering is that I made it a little bit too big on purpose so I could shave it down. And you can take a few measurements directly from the head. One of the things is that, I think I'm just gonna remove a little bit here, like that, just so I have a better measurement. If you need to increase the size of the rib cage, you can actually kind of squeeze it, it'll start go longer, or you can cut it, move it, put a piece of clay here. But I tend to like the squeezing because it doesn't mean that I make a modification that I have to push back together. But before I do that, I just have to kind of consider really what is happening with the sculpture, because there's quite a bit of issues with it. If you look at the model in the profile, and there's quite a bit, you need to kind of figure out. One of the things I try and do is take a measurement and figure out the midway. Right away, I noticed that I need to add a little bit more clay to the front because the hand should be a little bit further out. And right now, they're just like a little bit too far in. So that's going to decrease this. And as I'm drawing, I use a tool like this and I try to figure out where things are. The fat folds, for example, the belly, and then once I get here, I'm noticing that like the breast is actually a little bit, far forward. So I'm kind of like doing a drawing and just kind of roughing it by removing it. But you have to be careful because if you remove it, then you're gonna have to add a little bit more, which is very difficult when you're sculpting like this because you're constantly like pushing and it's moving and it's sinking. I believe I also need to move this arm forward just a bit. But at this point, I'm making just like little moves here and there and then just kind of using my finger to kind of push it in. Another good way of doing it is by using a tool. Something like this. Just take a piece of clay and just kind of use it to put where it needs to be. And for this sort of sculpture, you will need tools because it's very difficult to sculpt the underneath. So as our belly goes like this, the rib cage goes up. So all of this is going to be going up. That means that this will be pushed up. It doesn't seem like the arm needs to move forward, and that's the part that's confusing me. But I think it might be because my head is just so abnormally big. So our hair is right about here. And then I have the hairline here and it comes to here. So that means that if the hairline is there, her jaw is here. So it's going to reduce it for a little bit. And then you need to look at the angle of her face. So it is a little bit smaller. So I'm going to go ahead and just remove it. That means that I'll remove the details I've done. So it doesn't really matter at this point. So if I'm working from the side, I can just take this tool, just kind of chop off that front. And having a nice front like this, there's the face, will help you establish all the lines again. So this line, and I do this a lot. Like I'm never happy with the sculpture. So let me go ahead and try and just make it a little bit rounder. And this tool, like these paint scraper tools, are really excellent for sculpture. All the clay that I take right now at this point, because the head has been standing forward, it's a little bit drier. So you're going to be putting this in a bag, all of the remnants that you're going to be using, and you're going to be putting it in the bag. That way you can wet it and it doesn't lose any moisture. Another thing you can do is just leave it here and then cover it with plastic. And what I do is I tend to like put a finger like this and just fill that with water. And usually that's going to really wet that clay. I try to look at the sculpture the same direction. So right now I'm like looking for the eye level. The eyes are going to be at the midway, and I can just take this to kind of indicate it. You know, often when you indicate a little bit of the face, it helps you add all the details, but don't work too much on the details. And this stick is actually very loose, and it keeps falling because it's just a little bit bent. So push your head a little bit there. So I'm not going to work too much on the head. It helps to have very large tools for this point, just to kind of round things off like this. And I like these wire tools for creating a little bit more of the sharper lines. So this is going to be the neck. Might as well indicate that as well. She's got like a running back's neck. And a lot of times it's the head that throws me off, like the size of the head. So let's reduce it. All right, that's a little bit better. So the head's smaller. She's got a lot of hair. So that means that the top of her head is actually hair, and this is the hair. But we're going to be changing that in a bit. So that's the hairline. That means that the forehead is right about here. That's the danger of sculpting the hair before you have the anatomy of the skull down. The reason I put the hair is that way I have a support while I put the head in there, because I need it to attach itself to the rib cage. And so that right now that's just a structural support. So I'm going to add where the nose is. Might as well just add a little bit more. And I like to kind of scoop in where the eyes are. You can make it pretty deep. Doesn't really matter. Right now it looks like she's got a mullet. So let's just add the nose here. This is a very difficult pose, just because of the direction. Yeah, it's definitely helping. So I'm going to turn just the model to the front. She's an excellent model. So I try to take like nice wet clay and just add it. One of the things I might have to do is remove the entire head to work on, because it's so difficult to work on it in this position. But at this point, you're seeing a little bit of what is happening. So the head was definitely a little bit bigger than what it should have been. And you know, her face and everything is very soft, like her entire So I'm not going to work too much on the head. All of these bits of clay, you should take them before they dry and just kind of put them together. So if you're looking from this vantage point, the arm actually needs to come out a little bit more. So I've been making quite a bit of these changes. Shoulders, this part goes in. But that's dangerous. Like if you make it too weak, it could collapse. And I think one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to take the clay that I'm removing, and that's going to be our support. All the clay. I'm just going to add it onto this lump. So her head is going to be, I keep going back to the head even though I don't want to really get into it, because that's going to be a video all of its own. It's so difficult to do this sculpture because of the position. If it was oil-based clay, you can like remove parts. It would be so much easier to do. And she has a lot of hair that attaches to here, so that's going to be good. So one of the things that's also happening is like right about here, That's where the, what is the anterior, posterior, no, it's the, well, the iliac crest is over here. So it's the spine of the hips are there, and that's why there's a depression right over here. And then her belly fat starts a little bit further up. So on the other side, it's the same thing. So I made it a little bit too fat. Just add this clay onto this. I'm definitely going to have to clean these stools. They're getting quite dirty. So where the leg attaches to the hips, it actually goes in a little bit more. I don't want to add too much. So she's got a lot more fat happening here in the hips. We're not really that concerned with the details. We're more concerned with the proportions, the general proportions. Once we get that right, we should be able to like divide it into compartments and start figuring out where things are. So right now I'm missing a little bit of the back of the head that's bothering me. So I'm going to go ahead and add just a little bit. That's one of the dangers too when sculpting, is that you forget to add the back of the head and the heads become too narrow. Notice that one of the things I did is like I held the sculpture in the front here to add the clay because I don't want the head to start coming down. Another thing that I need to do is add clay to the back, to the upper back. This part is actually much fuller on her because if you pay attention to like the rib cage is like right about here. It's an egg shape. So this part is a little bit higher, and a lot of it has to do with the acromion process and the scapula. She's got weight on her shoulders, so that means that the shoulder blades are actually going to be kind of coming out. And when you pay attention, this arm, the left arm, is not the same position. You would think they should be symmetrical, but the left arm is forward and outward more. So this one is actually higher up. One way to kind of figure it out is by taking a line like this and line up the acromion, which is the bony process, and kind of see where it goes. And one way you can do to make it a little bit more dynamic is just to kind of exaggerate it. If you exaggerate it, it makes it a little bit more interesting. But I'm going to keep it about the same. Also, at this point, it's probably a good idea to look at the head, and I didn't do that too well because I just wanted to add. But she's actually looking this way, and that gives it a really nice kind of position. I don't even have to move the stick too much and worry about potential breakage. But so she's looking at a very different location than the front. So, and you can exaggerate that. Remember, this is just a rough in. But we can add some just quick details like the zygomatic bone here, the jaw. And then eventually we'll add all the features, and we'll do a quick sculpture of just the head. Right now it's more like a skeleton. Okay, that's as far as I want to go. But I keep looking at it, I'm like, oh, you should probably do more. All right, before we put it away, one thing I like to do is just like put my tools really close and then put this clay here. And you see like the sculpture actually moves up, because we want it to go up a little bit because it keeps dropping. So with this, and knowing that we have a couple other things to do, including increasing a little bit of the base up in the front, just so we can get the hands out a little bit further. Otherwise, they're going to dangle under the base, and we don't want that. We want them to kind of dry at the same length that everything else is drying, so we don't have any cracks. And I'm just going to rough the surface like this. And you know, this stick is eventually going to break. I kind of feel that the head is definitely not going to hold overnight. Somebody posted up in the comments they're having trouble keeping the clay nice and wet. One of the things you can do is you need to cover it with a sheet of plastic. And if you have cloths, I use these cloths, get them wet, don't come in the sink, and just put them over it, and it's really gonna hold on to that moisture. But for this, I want it to get dry just a little bit, so I'm just gonna like cover it with some plastic. And I just use a regular trash bag. This would be a pretty big one. And you have to be careful putting this thing on here. I touch the base, and usually that kind of seals it, especially when I wet it. I wet it before I put it in here. Then I push it down, try to remove the air. And some people even like put their tools like this on top. That way no air will come inside. Another way is to put the plastic over your base and kind of make it very airtight. That's really the best way. But since I want this to dry just a little bit, I'm going to let it a little bit on the looser side. So that is how you cover the sculpture.